Science fiction should point to the horizon and say, that's where we're going.
Everybody on the show was about how to do it. It was never about no.
You have the same emotions and everything, you're just an alien.
There is no button on the computer that says, cool shot.
You know, we were kind of the new kids on the block, so we were definitely out to prove ourselves.
The hardest part was that techno babble.
We've created something that is lasting. It's a brand name now.
It was a ball, man. You know, it's like you got to go to work every day with your buddies.
T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6.
Babylon 5 came about through working on two different ideas for series. One was a vast, galaxy-spanning, huge show following the rise and fall of empires. The other show in the back of my head was about a small space station and people trapped in a tin can, as it were, having to deal with each other in a closed environment, both far in the future. And I realized, no, these are the same story. I love sagas. I grew up on Lord of the Rings, the Foundation books, and British television, which used a lot of long-term storytelling, and thought, why hasn't anyone done a real saga for American television? One book over a period of 4 or 5 years.
When he delivered the show to us, I read it, liked it very, very much, and attempted to put it together. And it was a very difficult sell.
You know, we felt that Babylon 5 had the chops and had the substance to sustain itself as a series. The studio felt a little bit more nervous because of the past reputations of science fiction.
With Joe and I, this has always been an uphill battle. It was an uphill battle to get the pilot made. It was an uphill battle to get the series made.
It took 5 years to find a home for Babylon 5.
We never gave up. We believed in it. And Warner's then supported the show. So that's the beginning.
I think that Joe came along at a time when people were ready for a different look on the future.
My thought was, we are not going to be perfect people. We'll bring to the stars with us our problems, our eccentricities, our prejudices. The context will be different, but we as humans remain the same. 200 years of evolution is not enough to really make a big change that way.
And I think the fact that the characters were flawed made them approachable to most people, because you can see in that character, yeah, I've done that, or I've had that problem, or I know somebody with those problems.
That was, to me, the greatest thing about doing the show, was to say, we're going to create a world that no one's seen before, and that's going to be really exciting.
So once you have the universe established, you then try and find the characters that reflect that universe. Michael O'Hare brought the classic leading man looks, but beyond that, there's a thoughtfulness to Michael's performance, to who and what he is. And the character of Sinclair is not a jingoistic military leader. He's a very thoughtful man, and Michael had that presence that he brought to the role. Claudia, she's very funny. She's a rogue, and the part she was called upon to play initially was a very staid, reserved Russian person, drawing on my own background for what that character was. And over the course of the season, Claudia kept nudging me toward making the character funny, and that humor began to emerge after a while.
Claudia was a jokester, and so was Jerry Doyle. And if you do scenes with those two, you know you're gonna have a lot of fun.
Garibaldi was always the guy that was going to be there to make sure that other people were okay or taken care of. He was a caretaker, and would sacrifice himself for others or the greater good, and that would truly make him happy.
When Andreas Katsoulis came in as Jakar, there was no one who even came close. He brought that charisma, that sense of great dignity, the fiery temperament that Jakar had to have. And I knew right off the bat that he was going to be our Jakar. Interestingly enough, he was sitting next to Peter Jurasik, who was coming in for Lando, and they were talking together and had that nice relationship going on from the beginning. With Mira, she had a quality of great dignity, a sense of presence that became a great addition to the show.
It wasn't just going to be another science fiction doctor, you know, just come in, you know, explain the techno-babble and leave. He was going to have real kind of a three-dimensional kind of a quality, emotional. You know, he's very analytical, and yet there were some other qualities that were human about him.
He was like the Jiminy Cricket, you know, giving, you know, this kind of moral advice to Lando, which he didn't take it most of the time. He was forced into situations that made him more heroic than he ever dreamed of being. You know, and lucky for him, it paid off.
The real ingredient that makes a television series successful is the writing.
I believe that you get to story from character. You find out what does a person want, how far would they go to get it, how far would someone else go try and stop them. That creates the story. As a writer, I believe that the more you know your characters, the more the stories take care of themselves.
I think that the best year was the first year, because Joe really had to write some scripts. As far as an actor's concerned, he really had to write some scripts to really flesh out the character.
The great thing about Babylon 5 is we had very inspired writing that pointed us in a good direction, and we had producers that didn't really tie our hands. I mean, they certainly had their input and they had their ideas of what they wanted, but they were willing to give us a first shot at coming up with what the ships look like, what the shots should be.
He will plant something in an early episode that you forget about, and then you see the reason for him putting it in when you see the 9th or 10th episode pick up on it. And it works that way right through the entire 110 episodes.
And so there was always like these little, you know, almost red herrings, or these little, you know, MacGuffins that would be in a show, and we would think like, we know there's a grand plan here, we just have to trust it and do it.
I've never been afraid to try new things. And on Babylon 5, to make this show work, we had to try new things on a regular basis. The CGI had never been done on that scale for television before, but we figured it would work, let's do it.
There's a lot of innovation between the computer graphics, which really had never been done before. We did desktop compositing. So it was a show where we had a lot of freedom to, both creatively and technically, to produce the show, and that was really pretty exciting.
CGI was just at the beginning. People did not believe that you could make CGI in a realistic form, and we had to prove that.
We did a 50-second shot of taking a spaceship from infinity right by camera and following it into the mouth of the space station, which would have been impossible to do using traditional motion control and miniature techniques at the time.
The visual effects were driven by the story, and they weren't just incidental, they weren't just filler, we weren't just slugging in something that showed a passage of time.
The makeup effects were also very ambitious for a television series. We had 3 main characters who were in heavy prosthetics, and to create a sense of a true point of call for trade and commerce, we had to have literally hundreds of people in prosthetics every day.
In Joe's scripts, you really have to pay attention to the emotional spine of what the story's about, or the character and how it evolves. So we kind of had this credo going into it that we weren't just going to do like foreheads, you know, like a forehead appliance. You know, we thought that was like, you know, just a little too obvious and had been done a lot. And we thought we could do better, so we kind of wanted to do whole characters where the whole back of the head, the face, and everything was kind of covered. By the time we came, like, I don't know, 3rd or 4th episode, all of a sudden we had maybe 2 or 3 days to get a character ready. So inevitably we ended up putting a forehead on this character because it's really all we had time to do. You know, you have to do it all from scratch, and it's very labor intensive. And even working 24 hours a day, there's only so many hours in the day to produce this work. So we gained a tremendous amount of respect for the work that had been done on previous shows like Star Trek once we were in the trenches and knew what it was like. I think it's one of the things that we do try to pay attention to when we design any characters, though, is that they're ultimately part of the storytelling process. You know, they aren't, I mean, I'd like to think these are great, just, you know, cool designs, but they can't just be designs, you know, that serve themselves. They have to serve the story also.
When we won the 2 Hugo Awards, the competition was shows like Apollo 13, the Star Trek shows, Toy Story, and to win against that kind of competition, it has to be very gratifying. It certainly was to me, it certainly was to Joe and all of us that worked on the show.
I just don't think in our wildest dreams when we first started doing the show that we ever thought we'd win an Emmy for it. I mean, maybe we secretly hoped for it, but I don't think we ever thought it was a reality. And so just getting nominated to begin with was amazing to us. It was actually probably more of a shock than anything. When we won it, I mean, you know, we were absolutely just, you know, dumbfounded. I mean, we were totally amazed.
I was asked to speak at MIT about 3 years ago, and they said there are 3 seminal American science fiction television series: the first Twilight Zone, the first Star Trek, and Babylon 5. We all represented paradigm shifts, and being a big Rod Serling fan, that was a big moment for me.
came together and we made something that was greater than the individual parts.
I think Babylon 5 was well accepted by the critics and the fans and the viewers because there wasn't a lot on television like that in the time. There certainly wasn't anything like that, and that level of action, the scope of battles and space scenes and what you could do with the ships wasn't as possible prior to Babylon 5.
So you can't just pin it down to any one thing. To me, any one thing would be the whole thing. It was just a lot of good friends. I missed the crew, I missed the cast, I missed the banter, I missed the energy. And it's opened up a lot of other doors for me. I've been able to, hang with the NASA astronauts and have been, in the space shuttle on the launch pad. I mean, that's kind of cool stuff.
The fans are constantly saying that the stories affected them on a very personal level. And I think that Joe has a great way of doing that, is taking a story, putting it in the future that relates to right now and what's a lot of people are going through, and people connected to it.
I think the message what anybody would want in today's world, in this present day, is that we're all different types of people and we all have to learn to live with each other. Even though the problems will arise, there's always some kind of a solution.
I think what made Babylon 5 work really at the end of the day is the fact that it took the genre seriously, that it had a 5-year arc, which had never been done before in American television, and that it played with myth and said to people, you have choices, consequences, and responsibility. The show was about hope to a large extent. It boiled down this series to its very finest points. It says that one person can make a difference. One person can change the world, but you must choose to do so. You must make the future or others will make it for you. And that story, that sense of hope and optimism, I think is very important to the success of Babylon 5 across the world.